Chapter 12, Flaming Wing, Part 1. Twilight stopped, muttering, and lifted her hoof. With a flick of magic, she tossed aside a stone that had dug uncomfortably into her heel.
4 days,
she grumbled. We're getting close, Applejack said beside her. Twilight gazed out at the patchwork of sunlit farmland sprawling around the coast road. The rest of the journey had been much the same, farms and villages interspersed with tracts of unclaimed land.
How do you know?
She asked, turning to look at Applejack. I've been here before, Applejack said simply. She pointed down the road. It sloped upward into the distance, wide and almost rigidly straight. Ahead, a couple of farmers pulled carts full of goods toward them. See that ridge up ahead? Twilight nodded, noting the spot where the road crested the hill. On the far side of that is Rigger's Cove and the Bridge of the Gods. And across the bridge, the city of Manehattan, Applejack said. We might be there by sundown. Twilight stepped forward again, sniffing the air, smelling the hint of salt in the air.
When did you visit Manehattan?
Long time ago. Bit after my parents died, Applejack said wistfully. I came here to live with my aunt and Uncle Orange.
Why?
Twilight asked.
Wasn't Granny Smith taking care of you?
Applejack nodded. Yeah. She looked ahead. I just had to get away. I wanted a different life. Or I thought I did, anyway. She kicked a small pebble off the road. It was tough without my mom, Pa. I thought the city would be different.
And it wasn't,
Twilight said. It wasn't. It hurt just as much there as anywhere else. The Oranges were nice, but they didn't understand. Not the way Granny did. Took me a while to figure out what I really wanted, Applejack said. One morning, I saw a rainbow in the distance, pointing the way back towards Ponyville, and I realized 2 things. She pulled her hat off while she walked and looked at the scale on the brim. First, I wanted to be just like my pa. And second, I wanted to kill a dragon. There was one pony that could help me do those things, and that was my granny. Applejack put her hat back on, staring forlornly at the cobble as it passed by. Turns out, I'll never be my pa. She turned to Twilight and smiled. I did kill a dragon, though, thanks to you. Twilight nodded.
Yeah, we did. Where do we go from there?
She said, staring ahead. We're gonna get this Black Knight, right? Applejack said with a grin. Twilight felt a small smile lift the corners of her mouth.
Right.
She glanced over her shoulder. Crystal Clear's group trundled along behind them. She didn't regret traveling with the scholar, even though her conversations with her were not as enlightening as she had hoped. Often her questions were answered with more questions. She shook her head, not wanting to think about what would have happened to the group of ponies if she had chosen to travel faster than Crystal Clear.
So what do you make of this Crystal Princess business?
Twilight asked. If any pony could give her a level opinion, it was Applejack. I don't rightly know, Applejack said. I mean, I've heard the rumors, but they sound like wishful thinking at best. But I guess we won't know for sure till we get to the city and can see her for ourselves.
I think she's very clever.
Twilight started at the voice in her other ear.
Rarity! Don't do that!
She shouted irritably.
Sorry, Twilight. Didn't mean to startle you.
Rarity said.
But a little bit of talent with illusion magic, or maybe she paid for a spell and, voila, wings.
Rarity continued as if nothing had happened.
And suddenly you've got the populace buzzing and the ear of the nobility. Ingenious. Well, what if they're real?
Pinky said.
Ah!
Twilight groaned.
Both of you! Psh, not likely,
Rarity said dismissively.
Well, they could be.
Pinky sulked as she trotted up beside Applejack from the road behind. Twilight shook her head.
The gods aren't coming back, Pinky. Even if we want them to. They're too busy.
She said bitterly.
She still hasn't answered my letter.
Twilight thought.
Probably avoiding my questions.
By busy, you mean dead, right, Twilight? Applejack asked.
Except for one,
Twilight said. Applejack shrugged. Granny always said Celestia had a good reason for not being around. Twilight kicked a pebble.
Oh, Granny Smith too, huh?
She thought.
Yeah.
She said.
If Celestia has a good answer, why doesn't she just tell me?
She wondered. Instead, here she was, her father dead and the power of the sun nowhere to be found.
Why does killing dragons and fighting demons come down to us?
She glanced at Celestial Fury's hilt.
Why can't Celestia carry her sword herself?
A shout broke Twilight from her thoughts. Halt! In the name of the Flaming Wing! She looked up. 4 Pegasi and Flaming Wing unicorns descended from above, pressing 2 captives, Rainbow and Fluttershy, toward the ground. A 5th Flaming Wing Pegasus hovered above, her plume larger than the rest. Twilight laced her magic around her swords wearily as the Flaming Wing squad landed. She watched her captured friends with concern. The 2 Pegasi had flown on ahead to stretch their wings and were supposed to be waiting up the road. Rainbow was disarmed. She had a black eye and her lip was split from a vicious blow. At least Fluttershy was largely unharmed, but Twilight didn't see any sign of Angel.
Sorry, Twilight. I tried to make a break for you and warn you, but...
Rainbow said. One of her captors clubbed her in the back of the head with a hoof. Shut up!
Twilight Sparkle, you and your associates are under arrest. We have you surrounded. If you do not drop your weapons and submit, we will use deadly force,
the commander announced. Twilight glanced to the sides. To her left, 4 Pegasi emerged from a wheat field. To her right, another 4 approached in the air, skimming low over freshly tilled dirt. Further off, 8 more took to the air from behind a farming cottage. 21 counting their leader. Her swords hummed to her. A list of choice spells formed in her mind. What are the charges? Applejack shouted.
All you need to know is that you are under arrest,
the commander said.
Submit. I can assure you you will be treated fairly. 21 heads,
Twilight mused. She could have them as surely as the sun rose at dawn. She remembered her first nightmare since Star Swirl died, where the Black Knight beheaded the residents of Candlekeep.
How many heads will I have when this is over? How deep will my ocean of blood be?
She wondered. Her friends were readying their weapons around her, waiting for her to make a decision that would end the standoff. She looked at the Pegasi again. They were on the ground now, landed and arrayed around her, with wings flared and wing blades ready. These weren't bandits. Brutes, maybe, but not rapists or murderers.
There has to be a better way, a better choice than killing them,
she thought.
We'll submit,
Twilight said. She slowly drew her swords and lowered them to the road. She could pick them up in an instant if she changed her mind. Her friends' weapons clattered to the ground as they followed suit, though Twilight noticed that only Rarity's bow was on the ground. Her daggers were nowhere to be found.
Good choice,
the commander said, hovering above Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy.
Now push them over here, especially you unicorns.
Twilight grit her teeth, hesitating.
Your possessions will be returned to you when and if your incarceration ends, the commander said.
Begrudgingly, Twilight sent her swords skittering across the cobble towards the Pegasi. Her friends kicked their weapons over, Immediately, the flaming winged soldier swarmed in, roughly jostling her and pushing her to the ground.
We're cooperating. Now what are we charged with?
Twilight shouted.
Murder, 2 counts of officers of the law. Resisting arrest, 1 count. Aiding and abetting a grand theft, 1 count. You're also the last ponies to meet with Lord Ruby, and as such you are charged with murder of nobility,
the commander said.
You ponies are going to hang,
she added with a grin. Twilight felt manacles clasp around her hind legs. A soldier leaned on her neck, forcing her head to the ground. Another rummaged through her packs, searching her.
Wait! Bronze Fury killed the soldiers!
She shouted desperately. She pulled the nose ring out of her pack with her levitation. The ring landed on the stone beside her with a soft clink. Vibrations reverberated through her skull and she groaned in pain. Some pony had hit her in the horn. Hard. A soldier picked the ring up and tossed it to the commander. She snatched it out of the air with a huff.
Ah, his nose ring.
She smiled.
We'll see if this makes it to court.
She pocketed the ring.
Oh, and she tried to do magic. Make that 2 counts of resisting arrest.
Her smile shifted to a smirk.
Get a suppressor on that unicorn ASAP,
she ordered. You lying pile of manure! Applejack roared. The soldier holding her down clamped something heavy around her horn. Immediately, she felt like her mind was buried underneath a pile of blankets, warm and suffocating. She gasped. Darkness crept at the edges of her vision. The last thing she heard before she lost consciousness was,
Round up the other group. They could have information.
Yes, Commander Lightning Dust. The bag of holding engulfed Twilight Sparkle in her nightmare. She sucked nothing through her nostrils. She couldn't breathe. It was a slow agony as she floated in nowhere, her sense of being drifting away.
Am I dead?
She wondered. She dismissed the thought. She couldn't be dead and dying at the same time. There was a glimmer, the mouth of the bag, and with a surge of desperate power, she reached for it. Twilight flickered back to consciousness. Some pony screamed in her ear. She slumped off the back of the pony carrying her and hit smooth stones. She bit her lip as her face smacked into the rocks, and the irony taste of blood filled her mouth. She smelled brine, and waves crashed in the distance. Beyond that, she felt a vast ocean of power once again open to her. She opened her eyes. Beside her, a flaming winged soldier writhed, a spike of metal lodged in her eye, fluids and blood dripping from it. She was screaming. What the hell happened? Some ponies shouted.
Get another suppressor on her,
Lightning Dust ordered.
Twilight!
Pinkie Pie cried out. A shadow fell over her. Blinking, she looked up and saw the silhouette of an armored Pegasus against the bright blue sky, a cylindrical object in his mouth.
Suppressor! Not again!
She thought, terrified. She lashed out with her magic and cast the soldier aside. He yelped, followed by the crunch of armor on stone and a sickening snap. There were 2 ponies screaming in pain now. She gathered her limbs underneath her, trying to stand.
Where are my swords?
She wondered. A pony smashed into her side, and chainmail links pinched her fur. A pair of limbs wrapped around her neck, forcing her down. She yelled and tried to throw her assailants off with a surge of magic, but one struck her in the horn as soon as the glow lit it.
Stop! Can't you see that it's killing her?
Fluttershy screamed.
She's just trying to live!
Something clasped around her horn, and the world went dark again. A hoof caressed Twilight's cheek, and she opened her eyes. Her head rested on a rough mattress. A metal cylinder wrapped in a blue aura floated beside her. She looked up and saw a white unicorn standing over her.
Rarity?
She breathed, hoarse. Rarity nodded.
Quiet now, Twilight,
she whispered, her hoof dropping away. She opened the cylinder, revealing a hinge and a hole just wide enough for a unicorn horn. Abjuration runes were inscribed on the inside of the suppressor. With one of her daggers, Rarity scored a line through the runes, then broke the pin that locked it around a unicorn's horn.
It shouldn't work quite so well anymore. I'm going to need to put this back on you, or else they'll put another one on. Are you ready?
Twilight swallowed and nodded, closing her eyes. The metal cylinder clasped around her horn, unlocked but attached, and she felt nothing. She sighed with relief and looked back up at Rarity.
Thank you,
she whispered. Rarity held a hoof to her lips, glancing to the side. Twilight followed her gaze. Beyond the foot of the low cot she lay on, she saw the metal bars of an open cell door set into the stone wall. Across the hall was a nearly identical cell. In the shadows beyond that cell's door, she thought she glimpsed Fluttershy. Voices echoed from outside.
Mind if I take the food?
The first, a mare, said. Would you? You're a godsend. My shift is about to end, this is the last tray, and I'd like to stay as far away from that purple unicorn as possible. Did you hear she broke a suppressor? Isn't that supposed to be impossible? A second voice, male, answered.
She did it. I was there. How do you think I got this bandage?
The first speaker said. Rarity moved to the cell door. She hid beside it and gently swung it shut. Her magic laced around the lock, and it clicked. This whole thing is weird. She's been in a coma since they brought her in. They're not supposed to react like that, the second speaker said. Say, you sure you're supposed to be on duty? That looks pretty bad.
I'm not. I'm gonna take her eye, just in case she makes it,
the mayor spitefully said. Ah, gotcha. Well, take the tray. I didn't hear nothing, the stallion said. Twilight heard the clop of hooves ascending a stone staircase. A second set of hooves moved toward her. The mare whistled softly to herself and keys jingled. As the hoofsteps loomed closer, Twilight closed her eyes and pretended to still be unconscious. The mare stopped, and a tray clacked in the corridor. A key clacked on metal.
Damn it,
the mare muttered. The keys clinked, then the lock clicked. Twilight opened one eye a slit. The mare swung the door open, a blood-stained bandage covering one of her eyes. Rarity lurked beside the door, her back pressed to the cold stone, her daggers ready. The mare stepped through the door.
You're pretty. This is going to be a shame,
she said, eyeing Twilight while she drew a dagger from a sheath at her shoulder.
I'm gonna give you a
Rarity's dagger pierced her neck, right at the base of her skull. She dropped instantly, her last breath whispering out of her mouth. Rarity used her magic to ease the body quietly to the floor. After pulling her dagger free, Rarity pushed the body under Twilight's cot with a combination of hooves and magic. Twilight realized that she had never seen Rarity actually kill another pony before, but the dressmaker did it with apparent ease and precision.
They should have put a suppressor on you, too,
Twilight whispered, managing a small smile.
Oh, they did. First thing I did once they were gone was pry it off.
Rarity grinned.
Now, Twilight, you'll have to work some wizardry to hide this body when you're feeling up to it. You have a few hours before another guard comes down here.
She looked Twilight over.
You're probably in no condition for casting now, but when you are recovered, don't cast an invisibility spell and try to escape. You need to sit tight while I arrange somewhere safe for us, or we'll be running through the streets chased by the entire flaming wing.
She stepped towards the open door.
Bidet, Twilight. And remember, you're in a coma. Pinky and I will be back soon.
Rarity said.
Rares, are you sure we can't bring them with us?
Pinky hissed from the corridor.
It'll work best if it's just us two, Pinky.
Rarity answered with a hint of remorse.
We'll be able to slip away without raising an alarm until they find the cells empty.
She closed the cell door behind her and locked it. A moment later, she slid a tray through a gap in the bars. A bowl of gruel and a bowl of water on it.
Don't eat this,
Rarity said. Y'all go. You're the sneakiest, Applejack said from an out-of-sight cell.
Get us out soon,
Rainbow said, her intense whisper carrying down the corridor. Twilight lurched off of the cot, manacles around her hooves clanking. She made her way to the cell door to get a look outside.
Remember, every pony, we're selfish criminals that left you behind,
Rarity said. And with that, she was gone, trotting silently off down the corridor. Pinky quietly stepped down the corridor and paused in front of Twilight's door. She slipped a hoof between the bars.
I'll be right back, Twilight. Pinky promise.
Twilight smiled, meeting Pinky's hoof with her own.
I'll see you soon, Pinky.
Then Pinky was gone too. Twilight sighed, settling back onto her haunches. She sniffed the gruel, a featureless white paste by the door, and her stomach turned. Even if she could eat while she was supposed to be comatose, she wouldn't want that. Before her eyes, a cockroach skittered across the floor and climbed up the edge of the bowl of gruel. The water was tempting, though.
Are you okay, Twilight?
Fluttershy asked softly from across the hall, her voice filled with concern.
I'll live,
Twilight said. She lifted up her forehooves, awkward with them chained together, and rubbed one of her eyes. She felt drained. Rarity was right, she was in no shape to work magic. She'd need at least a couple hours of sleep before she could even consider casting spells.
Thirsty? Go ahead and drink. I can refill the water,
Fluttershy said. Twilight nodded.
Thanks,
she said, leaning down to lap at the water. As soon as it touched her mouth, she sucked it down greedily until the bowl was empty, then licked her swollen bottom lip. When the bowl was empty, Fluttershy's eyes glowed, pulling water out of the ear to refill the bowl.
I can't believe they did that to you,
Fluttershy said. Twilight shrugged, turning. She glanced at the body under the bed.
They were scared. So were you.
We tried to stop them,
Rainbow said from a cell down the corridor.
but we weren't in much of a position to. You looked bad, Twilight.
Something caught Twilight's eye, and she looked up. She saw the orange glow of sunset over the tops of buildings out a narrow grate set high in the wall of her cell.
Mercy. All it got us was stuck in here.
She thought.
I'm sorry, every pony. We could have fought. I think we did the right thing,
Fluttershy said confidently. If we had fought, then what? Applejack asked. How many flaming wing ponies would we have to kill? Would they have brought us down eventually? You made the right call, Twilight. We just need to rely on Rarity to get us out of this. Twilight blinked, staring at the grate. She was certain she had seen a glimmer of green. A moment later, Spike appeared next to her. He wrapped his arms around her foreleg, tears in his eyes.
Twilight! You're alive!
Twilight nuzzled him.
You were gone, and then you flickered back for a second, and then you were gone again, and... nothing.
Spike said, sniffling.
I made it.
Twilight said calmly.
It's good to see you. But if you want to stay here, you need to be sure to leave if guards come. It would only cause problems if they saw you.
Spike nodded.
I won't let them see me,
He said. His eyes then landed under the bed, and his eyes widened.
Is that a body?
Yeah, I'll deal with it later,
Twilight said. She looked up at the grate again, a plan forming in her mind.